There's a big stigma around mental health, and that leads people to not really seek treatment when they probably should. If we can't see it, sometimes we don't believe it. So if you see a broken bone, you believe you have a broken bone. But did you know that the brain can break? I think the stigma starts with that, is facing our own demons, facing our own questions, and not imposing those on others.
Hey, it's Nate DiSarro, and welcome to Titans of Industry, the podcast where I talk to industry leaders and innovators who are at the top of their game and leading the pack in their fields, uncovering some of the best stories in today's business landscape. In this episode, I talk with Brian Mears, founder, president, and CEO of Alleviant Health Centers, headquartered in Little Rock, Arkansas, with clinics in 6 states, and they've only been around for about 3 years. Brian dives deep into the stigma surrounding mental health, why approximately 1 in 2 Americans are currently suffering from mental health, which is double what it was at the beginning of 2020, and why he is laser focused on building and leading the best teams in order to grow Alleviant into a national brand. From entrepreneurship to mental health, this episode has something for everybody. And now let's get to the episode. But before we do, it's important to know that whether you're a small business owner or the face of a multi-billion-dollar industry, your organization has a great story to tell, and Content Titan wants to help you tell it. We are a digital content creation powerhouse built for the 21st century, providing all-in creative, strategic, production, post-production, and distribution services for a 360-degree, 24/7 world. In our world, Titans are passionate, creative doers. They have the experience to take your project from start to finish, minimizing your involvement so you can focus on what matters most: running your business. So if you're ready to take your content strategy and production to the next level, our Titans are ready to help. Now here's my conversation with Brian Mears. Brian, thanks so much for hopping in here with us. I just want to start out by getting your background. How did you end up owning and running this company called Alleviant Health Centers?
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show. It's an interesting journey to go from my background into a ownership of a mental health practice. Professionally, prior to this, I was a certified registered nurse anesthetist. So I was performing anesthesia. And how do you move from anesthesia, which is in the nursing profession, the best nursing profession job there is. In medicine, it's one of the best jobs that there is. And how do you transition into a mental health field? Well, I stay current. I read a lot. And I saw that there was an anesthetic agent that was being used to treat outpatient mental health patients. I had a business background. I am an entrepreneur since an early age, since a kid. I've started many companies, and I always have that burning desire. No matter what I'm doing, I always look for something else. How do we make the world better? How do we do more? So as I saw this opportunity start emerging and started learning more about using anesthesia for outpatient mental health services, I started writing a business plan, which I was pretty good at. I spent a couple years developing this business model though. So by the time I was ready to launch it, it was a part-time endeavor for me. I still kept my anesthesia job and launched into this to really figure it out. But I knew that we had a recipe. I knew that we had a formula. And when the time was right, like any entrepreneur that is starting a business, you know, in short order, if you've got the right recipe, you will cut off the rest of your professional services. And I did that very quickly after starting this business.
So talk to me about when this business started and what the industry looked like when you jumped into it.
We started seeing our first patients in October of 2017, just a short 2.5, almost 3 years ago. We started right here in Little Rock, Arkansas, as a small procedure clinic that was doing anesthesia-based infusions for mental health. It was cash-based, and it was small. We were trying to figure out the medical protocol side of it. So we launched in 2017, and with the information I had, not being a mental health professional, I knew that about 20% of the population had a mental health diagnosis that needed treatment, but only about 8% of patients that had mental health diagnosis were treated. So there's a big gap. I thought the gap, first off, was pretty fascinating. Didn't really know why people didn't seek treatment that probably needed treatment. I had not had any true mental health experience before, so that was kind of an interesting variable. And I thought it's largely a population that is underserved. Well, I did find that out. It is a population that's underserved, and there's a big stigma around mental health. And that leads people to not really seek treatment when they probably should. And as time evolved, the data only started getting worse, not better. So we went from 20% of people that had a mental health diagnosis to, by January 2020, 24%. Today, in ending July of 2020, I just got a recent infographic from Blue Cross that says 50% of adult Americans now suffer from depression. In the last 4 months, it's doubled. So it's mind-boggling. It almost doesn't even make sense.
It's incredible. And we'll dive into that number here in a minute, because obviously that's an astounding number. But you said another word that's intriguing is the stigma. And I think anybody and everybody out there would recognize that there's a stigma around mental health. But now you're saying 49-50% of the American population lives with this stigma. Right. So first of all, why do you think there's a stigma surrounding mental health?
So this is a great question, and let me give you kind of a twofold answer probably. First, if I can be blunt, we're pretty superficial. And if we can't see it, sometimes we don't believe it. So if you see a broken bone, you believe you have a broken bone. You go to the emergency room and you cast that bone. But did you know that the brain is an organ? The brain can break. You can have dysfunctional circuitry, dysfunctional chemistry. You can have areas of the brain that literally shut down, turn off. The lights are gone. Nobody's home in certain areas of the brain. Because we can't see that, we like to place judgment on people. So I would say we have a stigma because we're judgmental people. We like to fit people into our belief system. So let's say that you drive a Mercedes and it looks like you've got money and you're a doctor or you're a lawyer or something, and people fit you into this box of you're affluent, you should not have problems. Yet physicians have very high suicide rates. That's an oversimplified example, but we judge everything. We shouldn't, because what we don't see is many times broken, and the brain is broken just like a broken bone can be broken. So that's the first thing. We love to judge where we shouldn't judge. We don't have any experience. I don't like to judge because, wow, that is a tremendous challenge and a burden. If you like to judge people, what a burden that you have. Release that burden, and you're going to feel better about yourself. I think frequently we try to judge because we're trying to justify ourselves. We're trying to justify our actions. And sometimes it's hard to look in the mirror. I think the stigma starts with that, is facing our own demons, facing our own questions, and not imposing those on others. But if you go throughout some areas of the country, particularly the world, but let's say you just go over to LA, talking about seeing your therapist, it's like talking about Starbucks. Everybody has a therapist. Everybody gets a Starbucks, right? It's normal, it's common, and that's good. Because if you see a mental health professional, it doesn't mean you're always broken either. It may mean that you're processing things so you don't become broken. We all feel things that we're not necessarily comfortable saying outside of a confidential environment. If you hold those in, it truly begins to alter your personality and alter your physiology to the point that you become broken, that you have a broken brain. So I think that that's a complex statement around stigma. It really has to do with locale. Where do you live? And what are the commonly held belief systems in that location?
And are you referring mainly geographically around the nation, or are you talking about zip code, neighborhood, or any of the above?
All the above. So it could be from door to door. Where do you live? Did you grow up in a house full of judgment? Did you grow up in a house that had no judgment? All of that leads you to a different mind state when you become an adolescent and an adult. So we largely are products of our environment. We can break out of that environmental mold, but we see things growing up. Did you know that most adult mental illness can be rooted back to the first 3 years of life? So there's traumas that happen in the first 3 years that alter personality to a point that it alters your adult life. So you've got to peel all the layers back of kind of your existence as a person, as an adult, and get back to the time you were little to be able to figure out your problems.
So how does that compare with, for instance, beginning of the year, 24%, 6 months later, almost 50% of the population? So that rapid of a growth, what's causing that? And we'll get to obviously the pandemic and everything rooted in that, but that rapid of a growth in mental health cases, are those being triggered by some sort of adolescent or youth trauma, or is this all current event based modern day?
Yeah, not always. Everything's not rooted in childhood trauma, of course. So if you were to experience a car accident and you had a family member in the car and they died, that would be an acute traumatic event in which you would need to really process that, or you could have significant issues. There are acute events in life that have nothing to do with childhood, of course. Right now, what we're experiencing is an acute worldwide event that is altering many people that don't know how to process fear and anxiety. So this is rooted in uncertainty, leading to fear and anxiety that is now altering our physiology to a point where we will see a very massive efflux, or we're going to see a very massive surge in chronic problems as we move forward.
That being said, obviously, there's no beating around the bush. We're in the middle of this global pandemic, hopefully on the downward slope. We don't know. But that brings up the uncertainty piece. And in your profession, I mean, I've talked to business leaders all over different industries, and everybody has different pros and cons of this. Some businesses obviously have had to scale up and had tremendous growth, and then others, obviously, tremendous reduction in revenue and everything else. But tell me about how this has affected your business. And then, what are some of the situations behind it that either cause that growth or pulling back on revenue?
Well, the pandemic is very unfortunate for our world, for our society, and for each of us. In our line of work, however, we're in mental health, and this is becoming a mental health event. This is not just a physical event. This is altering our mindset. We happen to be in a profession that naturally will do better because people are suffering with a mental health issue. We have well more than doubled our business just in the last 4 months. That's pretty big. We're expanding very rapidly, and that's out of need. When people call, we have a duty to respond. And that's what we do here at Alleviant Health Centers. It's our job, it's our duty to respond to the need that's out there. And right now, the need is massive, and it's actually a little scary. The need, I think, will soon overwhelm the system. So we've got to be very efficient and effective at our jobs, at rapidly treating people effectively, help them understand where they are, and hopefully help them understand how they can make it through tomorrow without suffering from a chronic mental illness such as treatment-resistant depression.
So talk to me about, there's a process you were kind of telling me about. For someone who doesn't have medical training in mental health, but you obviously read a lot and you've hired the people around you, what can people think about in terms of what that process might look like? Or what are the things that they can expect to go through?
Sure. So I personally don't have a background in mental health, but I have a significant background in the way our body works, in physiology. So mental health in general has been managed by psychiatrists, psychiatric nurse practitioners, and therapists. They help you with traditional therapies for the most part. Traditional therapies would be things like talk therapy. So that's a therapist dealing with you one-on-one, talking through your issues, using a variety of techniques to help you process. Physicians, psychiatrists, and nurse practitioners may use different tools such as medications. That would be a traditional way of looking at it, is you manage the symptoms of mental health by prescribing medications. Sometimes that's very effective. Other times it's not. I would suspect you know people that have a mental health problem and that are on medicines for, say, depression or anxiety. What frequently happens is that they are on more than one, and they may be on 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And the number can alter over time. The dosage can alter over time. If you've got a great team that can help you process the problem and get rid of the problem, then hopefully you can get off of the medications and kind of get out of the system and be able to live your own life free and independent of mental health providers. However, that's not always the case. So in our world right now, we treat a lot of patients that have a treatment-resistant disorder, not just a short-term depression or anxiety problem. We can treat that, of course, and we treat a lot of that. But the treatment-resistant disorders require much more defined care than just a medication. One thing that we do is we draw a lot of lab work. We work with primary care physicians to help figure things out, and we try to address the root cause of illness. We do psychogenomic testing. We look at DNA. We look at genetics. We look at metabolism. We look at the way you process medications. We look at dietary and lifestyle factors and spiritual health. And we try to put it together in a trifecta of mind, body, and spirit medicine, where of course we're managing the mind like everybody else would in traditional therapies. We're also managing the body because we're addressing gut health and adrenal health and thyroid health. We're addressing things that are vital to mental health. The mind is not the only thing involved in mental health. If your body is sick, your mind will suffer. And then the same thing about the spirit. The spirit has largely been a don't talk about it subject in healthcare. That's silly. It makes no sense because all of us have some belief system. The key is don't judge people about the belief system. It's help you process what your belief system is, what makes you tick, what makes you happy, what makes you whole, what makes you love, what makes you good, and help you tie that in to your mental and physical health. We process things a little bit differently, and it takes us a lot longer. That's one of the differentiators is we spend a lot of time with patients. And when I mean a lot of time, that means every time we see you, it's generally not a very quick appointment. So if you came in for a med check, it's going to be a med check plus. It's a med check plus we talk to you and really talk about everything's happening with you too. It's the only way we can really help identify lifestyle issues that we can work through with you.
Sure, because like you said, it's just a matter of an x-ray to see if something's broken. Well, then we can see that and know what the treatment is and move forward. But when you're talking about two additional components to what make us up, the mental piece and the spiritual piece, that's not as easy to just visually look at and see. That takes time. That takes conversation.
To answer your question more succinctly, what makes us different? It's what we consider our niche market. What is it that we do that's slightly different from others? What others do is vital and it's important and there's room for everybody. But our focus is called integrative holistic behavioral health. Integrative means connecting the mind, the body, and the spirit. Holistic means addressing the root. Behavioral health is everything psychology and psychiatry.
All right, so you started a company 3 years ago, and you've now doubled in size in a few months. How do you sustain that growth, and how do you personally manage that growth?
Preparation. We were prepared for this. This company was built to scale. That's why it took a couple years to develop pre-launch. And then as we've launched, you manage through a team. That takes time. So while it may seem like we've moved fast, we haven't moved fast. The market's available. So there's so many people suffering in this country with a mental illness that you could go anywhere and truthfully have a successful mental health practice as long as you're a good provider. We built an infrastructure to be able to scale across the country from coast to coast. The only way to scale with haste is twofold. So if we're talking more entrepreneurial, then you manage that through money. You have to have money to grow, and then you manage that through talent, through your team. You cannot do it without both. This is not a solo project. This has never been a solo project. I'm somebody that simply created a plan, but I am nothing more than just a coach for a team that has way more talent than I do as an individual.
So to stay on the entrepreneurial vein for a minute, there's a lot of philosophies out there, a lot of people that have determined what makes a successful business, what fails businesses, and there's often three things that kind of come up. One is ideas, another is execution, and another is culture. How do you rank those three in terms of importance and why?
I think you would get multiple different answers from multiple people, and we probably all believe it to our core, no matter what we say. But for me, there is nothing more important than culture. Culture is vital to success because culture is teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream work. If you're doing this alone, you're only going to be successful for your single talent. None of us are significantly talented in everything. We may have talents in one thing. That's why you have to have teams to build things. There's a lot of deficiencies that a successful entrepreneur better voice up to. If you are delusional and you think that you're talented in everything, you're probably not going to be very successful. So to me, culture drives everything. It's building the right team. Execution is also vital. You can have a fairly poor idea that you execute well, and you're still going to have a viable business. You could have the best idea in the world, but if you execute it poorly, you're going to have no business and you're going to be bankrupt and you're going to leave. So I would say execution is absolutely second. Ideas, while me personally, I love ideas because I have a visionary mindset, and I can get into the business talks if you want about what is a visionary and why do I say I'm that. It's because I'm an idea person. I like to think big picture and strategy and 3 years down the road or 5 years down the road and not all the details of today. I would rank ideas, though, last because you can have all the ideas in the world, but unless you execute it well, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. I think that kind of the average visionary, the average entrepreneur that is a visionary will have 10 to 20 ideas a day, and you have to decipher those, and you've got to push a lot of them away because ideas come and go, and you may believe that your ideas are good, but you don't want to get distracted on ideas. You've got to stay very focused on your core business. So culture number 1, execution number 2, ideas number 3, every day of the week.
I love that. And I would venture to say the majority of people I talk to, same order.
Great.
Absolutely. I think there's a bit of consistency there, but you're right. Different people, different answers. And I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a conference room or a brainstorming session or whatever. We put 1,000 ideas on a board, and then what it boils down to is what can we execute and what can we execute without railroading people and making the cultural aspect of this project something that people don't want to be a part of.
Right.
So I think you're absolutely right there. Vision and values. I think both of those kind of go hand in hand. You're a visionary leader. You're somebody who sees what you want to do and then comes up with the ideas and builds the team to execute on that. But if you don't do that without a set of values along the way, then you disrupt your culture and you have a difficult time scaling. So let's talk about that for a minute. We can start on either side, the vision side or the value side. Does one ring more valuable than the other to you?
Yeah, values. Vision, again, cannot be executed without the right team implementing your value system. I, of course, created a set of values to start, but they were never meant to last because once our team started developing, then the team helped develop the actual values that matter to the team. Not me. I didn't create those. I follow a specific management strategy that involves teamwork. Our team literally helped write our values. They also helped write our vision. I had our vision written out. But once our team was on board, we refined that and allowed input. And that's the way you get the buy-in from everybody. You have to have the team buy into the set of values and to the vision, or else it's just a job. And what I don't want are people to view their career as nothing more than a job. You want people to buy into the values and the mission with such vigor that this is not a job to them. This is something much bigger than just a paycheck. If you get on the mindset of culture and vision doesn't really matter, then you will have people revolving, always looking for the next best thing.
You as a leader, somebody that has taken on this role of CEO and you founded this company and historic entrepreneur, what would you say is your strongest leadership quality and how do you implement that on a daily basis?
I would say by far my strongest leadership quality is just coaching. I don't know that that'd be the most common type of thing to say as a leadership quality, but that's true. It is hire the right people and get out of the way. You just simply help form the playbook, but the players are the ones that make the plays. So if you relate this to like a Super Bowl NFL team, you've got to have the coach that puts you through the hard two-a-days and creates the practice drills that make you strong and fast and agile. But the execution of it always comes down to the players. So by far, that's what I'm best at. It's just creating a team and then hopefully mentoring the team and getting out of the way where they can truly lead their own teams, not get involved in the just all the details of execution. Like you never see a coach run out on the field and try to make a running touchdown. It just doesn't happen. That's because the players do that.
I love that. And I just finished watching the docuseries The Last Dance about the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan. And of course, for me, growing up as a teenager in the 90s, you know, that was everything to me. And getting to kind of pull back the curtain and see some of the insight into the coaches, the players, the things you never got to see through a press conference in a basketball game. You know, I mean, this was a really eye-opening experience. And I think there's so many valuable leadership principles that come out of that, from both senior management structure of a basketball program, a great coach that can help shape and mold the players, and then of course players who you have different skill sets and ability to lead through. And I love the business principles that come out of that leadership structure, especially since they were such a dominant force. Right. So when you look at things like going through tough times, you've got star players that'll step up and take the reins. But what do you do? How do you kind of manage a team and an organization through difficult challenges?
That is by far compassion. Compassion is what you have to have anytime there's fear and anxiety and tough time. If you don't lead with compassion, then I think you can lose respect and control of the team if you have the coaching mindset. If you think back to kind of business models as they've evolved over time in the 50s, 60s, 70s, where it was more hierarchical, it was, led by one person, whoever the boss was drives the organization. There was frequently a lot of just down talk to people. You didn't really care about what people felt or thought. That business model has almost died now. It just doesn't, it's not that viable anymore because culture has changed, and now we need to respect people, and we know that there's value in each person, and each person can bring significant talent to an organization. So if you lead in 360 degrees, then ultimately I think you can be a much better organization for that.
It's great to be able to draw this parallel from both your profession and industry as well as being the CEO of an organization. A lot of business leaders try and find innovative ways they can stay sharp and grow personally so that they can continue to innovate and lead and grow their company. But a lot of business leaders struggle with mental health and probably, to your point, don't go get that addressed and they just fight it. How do you ensure that you personally don't fall into any of that kind of stuff? Or is that something that you have to watch out for just like anybody else?
Sure. I think anybody that is an entrepreneur that leads a company is at risk. Absolutely. I think probably the majority of us that would be considered visionaries are emotional. That's why we are able to risk and that we're vulnerable and that we put it out and say, hey, here's my idea, and we're not scared of it necessarily. But criticism is really real. That can affect mindset. I think for me, resilience training has really helped, and I have definitely had resilience training. I'm career military also. I have been in combat environments that is a lot different than being here in the United States in a safe place, and you're not dealing with the potential of a rocket or something going off near you. So it's about the mindset and the experience that you've had too. So it's keeping things in perspective. So I think to answer your question, I have perspective that I think keeps me mentally healthy. I have a very distinct faith that keeps me grounded. I've got a wonderful family that keeps me grounded, and I work out. I'm fit. I pay attention to my body, but that doesn't mean I'm not at risk. I'm still at risk. So one of the things that everybody needs to do is process. The way you really, I think, can limit risk is to not let things build up, and you process quickly. If you process quickly and you keep perspective, you keep the things that are important to you, your value system intact, then your mental health is going to stay intact.
Love that. What's something that a lot of people just don't generally know about the industry? Like you said, there's a stigma behind it. People don't want to talk about it. But what do you think is something that to you is not that unique, but a lot of people would be like, wow, I can't believe that?
I would say first that the industry has evolved. I don't think people really realize how much this industry has evolved over the last 5 years or so. For decades, this industry was, might I say, fairly stagnant in terms of the mind was fairly separated from the body. So it's not that providers were stagnant, it's just that if you went and read a textbook, it talked about mind medicine and how do you manage the symptoms of mental illness, whether that be through prescription medicines or whether that be through other things. But it didn't really connect the mind and the body together until about a decade ago. And then you started reading in textbooks and being taught that the mind and the body is really connected, that there's the vagus nerve that's kind of like a superhighway that connects the gut to the brain, called the gut-brain barrier. Started learning a lot about the gut and the GI flora and the microbiome and how that can affect mental health. This is all relatively new. As you think about westernized medicine, in the last 10 years, there's been so much new information that textbooks have now been written about nutritional psychiatry. Those are new. That didn't exist till long ago. That is super exciting to me, to know that there is information in textbook format around nutritional psychiatry. There are fellowships now that you can go to learn how to treat the root cause of illness. So you go to integrated medicine fellowships. That's where you learn things at a different level, and you connect the mind, the body, and the spirit together. These are fellowship programs. This is not, some
Basic high school education.
It's not an off-the-wall thing. It's mainstream by major universities that are now offering fellowships in integrated medicine, functional medicine. People are now wanting to have a different way they're managed other than just medicines. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that there is now a newer way that you can treat mental illness. It takes more learning. It takes frequently going back to school. But once you learn it, it'll change your life. It'll change the way that you view the body.
So obviously, like any healthcare specialty, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Right. But if I'm sitting at home and thinking, well, what's something I can do myself to help improve my mental health? From a mental capacity, physical, and spiritual, is there one tip, trick that you can kind of throw out that helps people in general just be either more aware or work towards wellness on their own?
Sure. There's a number of simple things that one can do. I think that the word mindfulness has really started to catch hold. I think most Americans have now heard of mindfulness. A decade ago, probably very few people had heard of mindfulness. There are mindfulness apps. And a mindfulness process just helps you be more aware. Helps you you can even start to control some of your physiology through mindfulness, through active breathing exercises, active thinking or not thinking exercises. You can really start to control some of your heart rate and blood pressure. Not saying we can fix it, but if you're in an acute stressful situation, you could proceed with a mindfulness technique and really bring blood pressure down and really slow down breathing and heart rate and calm yourself down. So if you're dealing with something at home with anxiety like right now, mindfulness is a wonderful thing to do. Just go to Google Apps or go to Apple's App Store and look up mindfulness and meditation. It helps you just slow down for a minute. And that's one of our problems, is that we rarely slow down. We love input. We want sensory input all the time, whether we're getting that through the news, TV, radio, each other. We're constantly bombarded with stimuli. We have to learn to disconnect. And when we disconnect, we can reconnect with ourselves, with our mind, our body, and our spirit. We can become more grounded in our own belief system. We can really figure out who we are and not let others do that for us and tell us who we are and what to think.
Love that. So I've been doing a lot of research and just trying to build my knowledge base lately on just personality types as I think about managing people and just all the people that I interact with. What's their personality type? What's theirs? Being able to identify it pretty quickly, but also then how do you communicate to that person? How do you relate to that person? And as I've done my own personal study on that, you realize that people are just wired so differently. So when it comes to mental health, do you see certain personality types being more prone to needing mental health care, or is that something it doesn't matter? It doesn't matter who you are, what your personality type is?
Well, this is an excellent question. We could talk about this forever. I can tell you I'm not a personality expert. So I'm not going to presume to be one. So I'm not going to go down the path about is something medically sound here. This is more just on a personal and a business level. We do personality testing. And we love personality testing. And here's why. Unless we can identify with your personality, we can never truly learn to communicate well with you. There's where judgment can really start to occur. Why don't you see it like I see it? Well, you're a different person with a different personality. So for me, I'm an ENFJ, all right? I'm extroverted. I'm somebody that loves emotion. There are people out there that are introverted. They don't like emotion. So if I try to exert my belief system about I like to talk and engage, touchy-feely, shake hands, talk forever, there are some people that right then would cut it off because they're introverted. They don't like to talk. It makes them feel uncomfortable. That's okay. But if we try to push our beliefs on them, we will isolate and we'll create division. Is there a personality type that's more prone to mental illness? I can't tell you that because it's not my expertise. But on a business side, I can tell you that personalities are vital. If you understand personalities, it's vital to being able to better navigate the complexities of human interaction in business, where you may not get as angry or as mad or as frustrated because you really try to put yourself in their position. So we do personality testing, and we categorize people, and we push that out to everybody, so everybody in the company knows what everybody's personalities are. We have handouts for every personality type also. We're not the best at it yet, but we are trying to become better at it, and it is vital, I think, to cultural kind of success.
Well, I've kind of started saying I wish we could all wear name tags with not only our name but our personality type, because then I know immediately, do you want to hug? Do you not want to hug?
That's a great idea.
And I mean, I think there's just so much behind that we just leave off the table. That's
Right.
never part of the conversation, just on a human to human level. And I'm personally, I'm all about this human to human connection, but we can't have that connection if we don't really understand what makes you tick, what's your personality type. And, do you want to be in a room full of people and we're all just having a conversation, or do you want to be one-on-one, isolated, and nobody else around? Because, like you're saying, introverted people just don't want to be that way,
Right.
And, but I think another interesting piece is sometimes we do these personality tests and we say, well, that's just how I am. I can't be any other way. And I'm really trying to figure out, and I don't know if this is something you run into, but like people that view that as like, that's a hard stop. That's just who I am. But sometimes I find that is just an excuse.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you see that in sort of your leadership style and how you kind of lead people, like that people use that as a wall or an excuse, or do you try and coach people through overcoming those things?
I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think that's a lazy answer. I think we can all adapt and mold and become something different. It doesn't mean we're going to change our personality, but it means that we could become more amenable to a group. That even if you're an introvert, it doesn't mean you don't come to a group discussion. Even if you're a severe introvert, it means you're still valuable and you have good, valuable input that you need to give a group. Doesn't mean you're always going to be comfortable, but you do have to push your limits if you're going to succeed on a team. I think I would go as far as to say, if your personality type was so limiting that you could not effectively work in a team, then leave the team and go work on your own. That's how important personalities are. If you're so strict with your personality that it's your way or no way, then you should not be on a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, back to The Last Dance, there were a lot of references Michael Jordan would basically just get in somebody's face and say, that's not how we do that here. We're here to win. We're here to succeed. We're here to do this thing, accomplish this mission.
Right.
And if you're going to be that way, you're not valuable to this team. And I think there's a lot that can be taken out of that and applied into the business world as far as how a team operates and how leaders within a team can communicate with people, and say that's not a valid excuse.
Right, I agree completely.
All right, so you mentioned military background, and I'm always curious. I've had on the show Adam Head, the CEO of Carti, who also has a military background, and he has some really interesting perspectives on what he brings to the leadership structure of that organization. So what have you taken away from the military that you're able to apply and bring into your leadership role here?
Maybe I could start out by saying, just because you've been in the military, it doesn't mean that you're good. It doesn't mean that you're disciplined. It doesn't mean that you're fit mentally or physically. It doesn't mean a lot unless you can articulate some of the whys. So you ask a question, what's some of my experiences in the military that makes me a better business leader? I would say that the military gave me some structure that I wouldn't have otherwise seen. It gave me some opportunity that there's no way in the world you would ever get unless you had been in the military. It did give me training that I really loved. I didn't just go through it as a routine. I went through it to learn. In my first deployment, I was deployed to Germany in 2003 for a year at the beginning of the war, and I was thankfully given the opportunity to attend the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leader by Stephen Covey while I was deployed. That was fascinating. It was a voluntary thing. I had the opportunity to do it. I was really grateful for that. That's the first time I read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders. I was able to take classes at no cost to me, such as Microsoft Office, beginner, intermediate, advanced. I don't know anybody else that did that, but I did it. It was awesome. It was free. It was something the military had launched. Anybody could do it. I don't know anybody that did it. I did it because I knew I wanted that skill set to be able to work with tables and graphs and charts and learn formulas in Excel, not because I had a reason at that time. It was because I had the drive to learn. We had resiliency training. That was really great. You know, one thing that happens to many people whenever you come home from a combat environment is you have PTSD, or you enter into depressive states. You were acutely stressed over there, and now you're coming off of an acutely stressful event, and you don't really know how to cope with it, and your body's going through a change again because you went from very high fight or flight responses to now, well, there's nothing to fight or flight about, but your body's still kind of trying to figure it out because you had really high levels of adrenaline that was overseas, and now you don't have to have it. So there's a lot of reasons people feel weird. For me, I deployed with medical training. So for me, it was different. It wasn't shooting at people. I can't imagine that sort of stressor. But it was caring for people. And in my profession, you know, I was the only anesthesia provider in an entire area of a country. And so that was for me, a great thing. I loved it. I like that sort of stress. I like the unknown. It's kind of like business, and that's the correlation. It's the unknown that you actually look forward to. It's like looking at a blank wall or a blank canvas and writing a picture that doesn't exist, or making a painting that doesn't exist, or creating a book that has not been written. So the military gave me that opportunity because I was able to correlate what I like in business to a lot of the events and trainings that I had in the military.
I love that. As you continue to move forward, advance the company, experience crazy amounts of growth, what innovations or what changes do you see in the industry? I mean, you mentioned just in the last 5 years or so, there's been quite a bit of new knowledge and information being pushed out, but do you see anything on the forefront? Is there anything you guys are doing to really kind of change the narrative of mental health care?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our core values is innovation. We are a company with a mindset that will progress growth, and growth means the understanding of the human body and the way we should treat the human body. So some of the things that are upcoming are AI, artificial intelligence, and its application into healthcare. We are implementing our first AI product this coming Monday. It will be live in our practice. I don't know if anybody has ever done that in Arkansas, but we're excited that we're doing it in our practice. It's fascinating that products like that exist, where you're now bringing artificial intelligence into a practice. The propensity or the knowledge base that's available now and is rapidly progressing to treat the root cause of illness will change healthcare. It is changing healthcare. It will continue changing healthcare. Healthcare is on an unsustainable course. It's very expensive. Our outcomes aren't really necessarily getting better, and there has to be something that changes. In my opinion, the thing that needs to change is we need to get to the root cause of illness, and we need to try our best to get people well and out and not manage disease like we currently are. We have a disease care model, not necessarily a health care model. I don't know if you've heard that before, but we're really great at symptom management, but we're not so great at healing the disease at the root and getting people out of the system, out of our healthcare system, off of meds, resolve their issues. So AI, number one, evolution of our understanding, number two, and then some procedures that we have that are still relatively new in the industry. We do every day. One of them is called transcranial magnetic stimulation. We love transcranial magnetic stimulation. That's called TMS. TMS is a wonderful machine that induces a magnetic current to specific areas of the brain that are largely turned off. And I like to think of it as kind of like jump starting a car battery. If you go outside and you try to turn your car on and your car just doesn't really start, the first thing you do is you go get a pair of jumper cables. Why do you do that? You're trying to recharge your battery. Well, our brain needs recharging too in certain areas under certain conditions. So previously, for 50 plus years, the gold standard of recharging the brain was electroconvulsive shock therapy, or ECT. Now we have another way of treating kind of shock therapy with TMS, and that's inducing a magnetic current to a specific area of the brain that doesn't really have a lot of side effects to it, that's highly effective, but it doesn't treat everything either. It treats treatment-resistant depression, and in some cases it can treat anxiety as well. So a little more narrow focused, but it is really helping many of the patients that we manage with TMS. When we put it all together as a team, I think this is to culminate this point. It's team-based care is the way forward. We have been a healthcare system of segregation, of siloed healthcare, where it's very difficult for one person to talk to another. It's very difficult to communicate what you did as a provider with another provider. Everybody's so busy that how do you transmit data in a simplistic way and get on the same page? It's challenging. So the way forward is, in my opinion, largely team-based healthcare, because the minds of many are much greater than the minds of one. That's what we do at our center, is we have team-based care. When a patient needs something, it's rare that they're just getting one mind. They're getting multiple minds treating that person. That's much better than one. So I think that's the way forward too, is that we have to do more team-based care.
That's great. And so is each of those minds, as part of that process, a different sort of specialty?
Yes.
Somebody that, okay.
Yeah, it's not that it's just a different specialty. So sometimes you may want a colleague. If you're a psychiatrist, you may want another psychiatrist to talk to. If you're a psychiatric nurse practitioner, you may want a psychiatrist to talk to. If you're a psychiatrist, you may want a great therapist, a psychologist, a licensed clinical social worker, or a licensed professional counselor to talk to. So when you have a patient come in, let me give you an example. If you have a patient come in, they're coming in for a regular appointment, but it turns out they're suicidal. That is a great example of when to use a team. If you don't have a team that can quickly evaluate, assess, and make a plan immediately, then your job is probably going to be call an ambulance and send them to the hospital. They're suicidal. If you have a team that can quickly move in, address the problem on the spot, you're going to get a physician, nurse practitioner, a therapist, all putting their minds together to figure out what's really happening with this person. Are they acutely suicidal? Are they not? Are they here with another issue other than just suicidal ideation? But you get the team. I can't tell you how many times at our clinic that has happened. At every psychiatric clinic, at every behavioral health clinic, you're going to get patients that present with suicidal ideation. But in ours, you get a team that will respond right then. That helps. So without getting into all the details, it helps immensely.
So if I'm somebody that, struggles with anxiety or, think I have some kind of mental health condition I want to try and figure out, but the anxiety itself makes me so that I don't even want to call. I don't even want to come in. What's the process for somebody who wants to get treatment but feels like they can't, or they're embarrassed, or the stigma's too strong, or they don't want their family to know or their coworkers to know? Because I'm sure there's any number of those scenarios out there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's one of the points that would lead to that gap I talked about at the very beginning between like 20% a couple years ago of Americans have a mental health diagnosis, but only 8% were being treated. Well, the other 12, many of them needed treatment, but it's the stigma personally that they feel, or the anxiety they feel. Anxiety is real. It is real. It will cause heart rate fluctuations. It will cause blood pressure to increase. It causes your face to get red, for you to sweat. It causes panic attacks. There's a lot of things that can happen with severe anxiety. Just presenting into a behavioral health practice can induce anxiety if you're there for anxiety. So no doubt that's a real problem. One way that we have addressed that is prior to COVID, we were already doing telebehavioral health services. So now I think it's easier than ever to simply come see us from the comfort and safety and security of your own home. Whatever your safe place is, that could be sitting in your driveway, in your vehicle talking to us. Wherever you're comfortable, that's where you meet with us. So telemedicine, or I call it telebehavioral health because it incorporates the profession of psychiatry and psychology, allows you to see your provider from wherever you're comfortable seeing them from. It's a game changer.
I love that. So, I mean, I guess that kind of falls into the innovation category, even though you guys have been doing it. But do you see advances, different ways telehealth is, or telebehavioral?
Yeah, telebehavioral health
is kind of allowing for the practice of mental health care to move forward? I mean, is that a big driver in the growth?
Absolutely. So if you think about our country is largely rural. We're not metropolitan. We have many metropolitan areas, but the vast majority of American citizens do not live in metropolitan areas. They live in rural areas. Rural areas rarely have mental health providers. If they do have a mental health provider, it may be one, let's say a therapist, but you're almost never going to get a psychiatrist. You're rarely ever going to get a psychiatric nurse practitioner, people that are managing psychiatric medications. That's vital and it's needed. The only way to truly access them is now through telehealth. Prior to that, mental health medicines were largely being managed by family care doctors that lived out in rural America. But that's not really what's happening now. And the reason is many type of medicines have now kind of been put on a do not prescribe list for family medicine docs, such as certain types of stimulants or certain types of antipsychotics. There are certain medicines that really should be prescribed by the specialists, the quarterbacks of psychiatry. They're the ones that have went through that advanced training to manage mental health. So when a primary care doc can now refer from rural America to the psychiatrist or nurse practitioner of their choice, you get a different level of care that you couldn't have otherwise got. So it's opened the door up for us to get referrals from all over the state, where otherwise we didn't really have the opportunity to see them. Before, we did see people from out of town. We had people drive from Fayetteville down here to see us, from Harrison down here to see us. That was, to me, challenging to drive 2.5, 3 hours to come see your provider and to keep that up on a monthly or even quarterly basis. Telemedicine now has kind of fixed that. And some of the rules, the federal and state rules, have now went away that allow you to establish care via telemedicine. So we're in a different day. So that's one thing I think that we should add to the list of things that are changing the future of healthcare.
Because I guess when you think about it, you know, if I break a bone, well, I need a doctor to physically be able to touch that area and help fix it, put a cast on, whatever the case may be. But when it comes to mental health, I mean, how much physical contact is needed?
That's a interesting question. And it's one that's, I think, almost wrought in complexities. And I think you could get people answering the question differently. Since I'm not the mental health expert, I don't want to answer for mental health experts. But I will answer more in generality. And that is, I think you could assume that that's the case. It's that it's a lot easier to manage people remotely because you don't have the broken bone that you physically have to put a cast on. I would agree with that. And I think that all of our providers that are providing those services now would tend to agree with that. But if you haven't done it, you may not agree with that. Our providers that had not performed telebehavioral health services before COVID, many of them were worried about providing telebehavioral health services, and they didn't. They were in our clinic seeing patients every day. They had never done telemedicine before. After COVID, we went from 8% of all our appointments were seen via a telebehavioral behavioral health platform to 77% now. And we've doubled in business. So we're seeing a lot of patients, and all of our providers are seeing patients via a telebehavioral health platform now. So even people who said, I don't really like it, now really like it. So I would say it's all about perspective again. What's the mind state and the experience of a person that has not performed telehealth versus that is? There are certain instances that you want to see people in person. No question about it. There are certain mood states. There are certain problems. There are certain medicines that you would still want to see people to be able to really look at their body movements and responses and details of an appointment that you may not feel comfortable doing remote. So I don't want to overgeneralize, say every patient, because it's not every patient that can be managed remotely.
So, and speaking of just going to the business model, you've built a brand that is now in multiple states.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about sort of the growth strategy and how you're planning on taking this more national and where you're planning on being.
We'll be everywhere. I mean, that's what we plan on being, and I believe we're going to make that happen, and it's going to be in short order. Right now, we are in Florida, we're in Arkansas, Tennessee, Ohio, Colorado, California. We're spreading around, and we're spreading because there are providers out there that love taking care of patients, but don't necessarily love taking care of business. They don't have the experience to open a business. They need help managing their business, and they need coaching. So that's what we're here for. It's to help coach you. We're not here to run a medical practice from afar. If you are a provider that's setting up a practice with us, your patient's your patient. You always treat your patient as you know how, not as we know how. We simply give you different tools and try to offload a lot of the administrative responsibility that makes you maybe less efficient as a provider business owner. And there are a lot of things that we do to support those practices from afar. We have grown, while it may seem like fairly quickly, it's been very structured so far, might I say even limited, because we have not grown a lot this year other than in patient volume, but not in practice locations for a reason. That's because we're building a new practice type here in Little Rock right now. It's a very large practice with a different layer of complexity, and our focus is on that. After that facility opens, we will begin our national growth plan again with multiple sizes and types of clinics at that point.
So if I am somebody that is, thinking I need mental health care, do I go to a primary care physician first? Do I call you guys directly? What's the process to become a patient or get the care that I need?
It's all insurance dependent. It's all based upon your individual insurance. Most insurances now allow direct access to your mental health provider without a referral. We're a fully credentialed insurance-based healthcare clinic, so we accept every major payer. All you have to do is call us, and if you call us, we will look at your benefits and eligibility and see if you have the need for a referral. If you do, then we'll call your primary care provider and get the referral for you. You do not always have to go to your primary care provider. If you do, that may slow you down from getting the mental health care that you need. So I would say always, no matter where you're at in the country, if you need mental health help, call a mental health provider and let them help you figure out if you have benefits or not. We can do that in very short time.
Love that. All right, I want to jump into some quick hit questions, a little more, kind of on the fun personal side. But you mentioned you educate yourself a lot. So when it comes to books, what's the latest book you've read or the best book you've read lately?
I do educate myself a lot. I do that constantly. I read, on average, multiple books a week. So the best book I've read in the last year, the book that has affected this business the most, is called Traction by Gino Wickman. I was looking for a specific management style, and that book gives you kind of a formula on a really good defined management strategy. So that's the most influential book I've read related to business.
Are you an audiobook guy, or you like the hard?
I do both. I'm not somebody that has a lot of downtime. So I try to make the most of my time. So if I'm in the car and I have time, I will listen to an audiobook while I'm in the car. But no, I've got lots of hard copies, and I read the hard copies. I cannot just do audiobooks. I have to write in the ledgers. I've got to highlight. I've got to extract data. I've got to put it in my own note format to be able to retain it and utilize it. If I just hear it in an audiobook, I think I listen to more fiction books that are audio. I don't really like nonfiction books audio because they're too heavy, and to me it's just not that practical.
What's one daily routine that you kind of have to do every single day?
I pray. I have faith. I have to ask for guidance, to make good choices, to be a good person. But I work out. That's important to me. I do it midday. That's not when most people work out, but it's when I work out. It gives me I think a different mindset to be able to break away from business every morning at 11 and go to the gym and work out hard and come back, in a different mindset and ready to take on the afternoon. So that's I have to do that.
I love that. Best piece of advice you've either given or received?
I would say I do give a lot of advice, but I don't know that any of it is significantly valuable. I look for more advice than I probably give advice, so let me pass on that one.
A lot of people, obviously, over the last 4 or 5 months have created new habits, some good, some bad, but do you have any newly formed habits that you're aware of?
I've actually became a little more OCD. I don't think I've ever told anybody that, but there are certain things that I do that I notice I do now that it's kind of strange. Like probably the weirdest thing is anytime I'm fixing to leave, I tap all 4 pockets. Not that I'm always thinking about exactly what I have, but I know I always have something in all 4 pockets, and I always have one thing in all 4 pockets. So if all 4 pockets have something in it, I'm good and I can leave. But I do that all the time, multiple times a day now. So maybe I'm becoming OCD.
I'm laughing because I'm kind of the same way. I've got keys here, AirPods here, wallet here, phone here. It's just one of those things. You kind of, if I don't have one of those, then something's off.
Right. And that just started this year. I did not do that last year.
I love that. If you could write a book, what would it be about, or what would the title be?
I am extremely focused on business. It would always be about business. I hope I have some value that I could add to somebody, and I do intend on writing a book. And I think the content of the book drives the title. I think title should come last. So if I have to answer that question right now, it is what not to do in business, not what to do. I don't have a formula for everybody to make you successful, but what I do have is I've learned a lot of critical errors. I make a lot of errors. I learn from those errors. I note those errors, and I look forward to mistakes because we grow from those. And I've learned valuable mistakes that I'm willing to share and be vulnerable to share that will hopefully help you be, better mentally, better financially, not go through the same personal relationship issues that you go through as you grow a business. So it would be what not to do in business.
Does anything stand out, a top of the list, kind of chapter 1 in the book, as far as what not to do?
Oh, you put me on the spot. So there's a lot of things that I could put as kind of the priority of a book. But in a company like this that has definitely underwent scaling, I could talk everything between finance, capital raising, wasting money, the challenges of hiring, the challenges of terminating. I would think more than anything, the thing that I would talk about is building your team. How to build a team effectively, the mistakes I've made in building a team. I would put probably number 1 as what not to do, and that is the ability to discern truth from error. The ability to look somebody in the eye and do you believe what they say or don't believe what they say? As you're building a business, everybody's a salesman. The people that are applying are salesmen trying to become part of your team. All the vendors are salesmen. Everybody tells you what you want to hear. I think that would be one of the first things that I would write about, is how do you discern what is right from wrong, and how does that keep you out of hot water, both financially and legally?
That's good. We may have to have a whole other episode just on that topic, because I think there's some real value in that. What's the best thing you've bought for under $100 in the last year?
Books, no doubt. It's books. Books. If you can't tell, maybe I'm a little OCD also about reading, but everybody's smarter than me. I just learn from everybody, and then I put little bits and pieces together to try to make something a little different. And so all the books that I buy are generally under $100. Most are around $20. So the best money I've spent on books that were not related to business but healthcare, I would highly recommend a book by Dr. Kelly Brogan. If you just look her up, kellybroganmd.com. She's got a lot of books now. But her first book that she wrote really helped me understand kind of the holistic side of healthcare in a simplistic way. So I would recommend her book. That's probably $20 as well.
So I think the takeaway there is, just because you're running a scalable, highly successful business, you never know it all. You never know everything.
If you ever think you know it all, then you need to leave. You need to leave. If you ever think you're the smartest person in a room, you should leave the room. You always should be willing to learn. Always. So if you're not hiring people that are smarter than you, I know in business you hear that a lot, but if you are not hiring somebody smarter than you that's directly reporting to you, you're wrong. You know why you're wrong? Because that means you're going to invest so much time in coaching and trying to create somebody that's just like you. And you don't want somebody just like you. You don't want yes people. You want people that are willing to look at you and say, no, come on. That is not the way we do it. You need to be able to have valuable, vulnerable discussions and realize that people know more in their lane. And you want to hire people that are wonderful and talented in their lane. So,
love it. Are you a music fan? What kind of music you listen to?
I am a big music fan. I'm always listening to music, and that depends on my mood state. But if I were to pick a genre, believe it or not, it's alternative music. I love alternative. I love 90s alternative. I love current alternative. I love singer-songwriter music. I think that's why I like alternative, because many alternative groups, they haven't necessarily made anything mainstream. And I like the emotion. I like the struggle. I like the people that are trying to do something and make it on their own and tell their stories. And alternative music to me gives such lessons. I just love it. Yeah.
I love it. So when concerts come back, who are you going to go see? Who's top of your list?
I'll probably go see kind of the first concert that comes. Really.
Buy your tickets early, because I think it's going to be sold out. Whoever it is, everybody's itching to get back.
Yeah. I don't know. I really want to go someplace and go to a forum that's a little private. I don't like the big arena type things. I like the more quaint, quiet, things. So I would it's not even about the artist. It would be more about the experience.
Love it. Favorite food? Favorite restaurant? Do you cook much? What do you like to make?
I like any healthy food that tastes good.
Such as?
I wouldn't care what really type of food it is, but if it were healthy and it tastes good, I'm good. So we really like any sort of Asian food. Doesn't matter if it's Chinese food, Japanese food. We love sushi. We love Thai food. We love Filipino food. There's a lot of foods we love. So as long as it's relatively healthy, what does that mean? We do cook. We don't cook as much as we would like to, because my wife and I are both very, very busy. But we like to cook with certain products. We've studied a lot about diet. And so in our own house, we only have organic products. If I were to say in general terms, though, like if I went out to eat, what would I want to eat? I'd say probably sushi stands out. Just love it.
Love it. It's Sushi Wednesday today, so I don't know if you ever do the Kroger sushi, but they have $5 sushi rolls on Wednesdays if you're ever looking for a quick lunch. But no, I love sushi. All right, so how can people find out more about you guys?
Yeah, we're really proud of our website. Please visit alleviant.com. That's alleviant.com. It's a tremendous website with a lot of information. Call 1-866-951-HEAL, which is 4325. That's 866-951-4325. That will, no matter where you're at in the country, that'll connect you right here to Little Rock, Arkansas, where we can process your call and talk to you and decide where the nearest location is and hopefully get you the help you need. We love to educate people. You can do that through our social media platforms too. So if you are not just a patient, you're not just looking, we hope you're not a patient looking for help. If you're somebody that may just be struggling or have a family member that's struggling and you're looking for that little extra something that could make you better, go to our Facebook page. Our Facebook page, you'll find us under Alleviant Health Centers. We post every day. We do community-based events that we post about where we talk about yoga, meditation, nutrition, mindfulness. We talk about anything we can that gives you tools that you can use on a daily basis to try to keep you out of your doctor's office.
I love it. Well, Brian, thanks so much for taking the time. This was a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Sure appreciate your time.
If you liked this episode of Titans of Industry, head to contenttitan.co/podcast for more episodes or subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks for listening.